Let's stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, okay? I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
You know what, if you got it to give away, I'll take whatever you don't want.
Where's Laura?
Seriously.
Mary, will you take the roll, please?
Here.
Here.
Here. Here.
Here. Mr. Grishin is out of town on business today. He has gone over the packet and talked to me about a few items. He was willing to call in, but it's kind of difficult. We don't get a good connection. But so as the vice president, I'm going to sit in his place and oversee the meeting, okay? So the first item is recognitions. We have one student recognition today, but it's a very good one. The 2019 National Merit Scholarship Program. The following student has been named a semifinalist in the 2019 National Merit Scholarship Program. About 1.6 million juniors in more than 22,000 high schools entered the 2019 competition by taking the 2017 preliminary SAT National Merit Scholar qualifying tests, and approximately 16,000 semifinalists throughout the nation are being recognized for their exceptional promise. She will have an opportunity to continue in competition for approximately 7,300 National Merit Scholarships worth more than $32 million that will be offered next spring. To be considered for a Merit Scholarship Award, semifinalists must fulfill several requirements to advance to the finalist level of the competition. About half the finalists will win a National Merit Scholarship, earning the Merit Scholar title. Congratulations to Elise Wojak.
Give that to her? Well, thank you.
Next, we'll have our reports. I think our Student Association is here today.
Yay.
So if you'd step up.
These are my favorite.
This is your first report for the year, right?
Yeah.
So make sure you introduce yourself first so we all know who's presenting to us, okay?
I'm Michelle Jacobs. I'm the president of the exec board.
I'm Sarah Pileski. I'm Director of Communications.
And I'm Rowan Elbert. I'm the Vice President of the Exec Board.
Okay.
So at the beginning of the year, we run the freshman orientation. So the Monday before school started, we came in and we did a mural that just said "Welcome back, Bulldogs." It was hanging on the banister, which is gone now. And then we make these packets for each of our tour guides to walk around with and have topics to hit on while you're on the tour, as well as candy for any freshman that asks a question. And then once school started on that Tuesday, we go through different blocks with each freshman. So we have a Chromebook training, a Q&A session in their homeroom where we give them a schedule, and then we also have tours around the school. And so that all went really successful this year. Lots of people were asking questions. There weren't too many questions that came to us throughout the school day, which means we did a good job on telling them where different rooms were. So that was really nice to see. And then once that was over, we moved on to homecoming.
Our homecoming theme this year was Summer Beneath the Sea. And so it started off with our Spirit Week, which went really well. We had high participation in a majority of our days. My favorite day was the Decades Day, and I think a lot of people that normally would participate ended up participating, which was really fun. And then we had our Penny Pinch for Ethan Tekalik, and we ended up raising about $700 for him, which was really nice. And he ended up coming home on Sunday, so we were able to it was like a fun whole thing that happened there. And then our dance went really well. We had a lot of positive feedback from many of the students about the diverse music that was played and how well the DJ did, and a lot of people stayed throughout the whole thing instead of coming for a little bit and leaving, that usually doesn't happen, so it was really nice to see that.
About how many kids came to the
I'm not sure about that number, but it was more than usual is what I was told. So.
Okay.
Although homecoming is one of the biggest events we do organize on the Student Association Exec Board, we have a lot more coming. We're starting to plan our fall/winter events, which include Thanksgiving baskets, Santa Anonymous, Coat and Blanket Drive, blood drive, and then our annual Pop Tops collection, and then donation. So we're really excited.
Great.
Congratulations.
Thanks.
Any questions or anything else you want to tell us?
Do you guys have any questions for us?
Any questions on? Any questions on the left?
First quarter is almost over.
Yeah.
9 days.
Are the three of you seniors?
Yeah.
Yes.
1/4 of the way done.
Yeah, crazy.
No senioritis, right?
No.
Okay. All right.
Well, thank you.
You're on
very
tape.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you for your
Thank you.
presence. Next would be the president's report, but being that he's not here, there is no president's report, so we'll move on to the superintendent's report.
Very short tonight. Facilities, just wanted to bring a brief update. I keeping the board in the loop. We're doing some field upgrades in conjunction with North Riverside, and the village will be working on, we're doing all the demolition, the concrete work, and we're putting in some fence height, increasing the fence height on the softball field that our varsity and JV softball teams use, which is in the back corner of Veterans Park. And so we need to upgrade. We need some upgrades to that field so that it can be competition and possibly host a regional or sectional. Even if in the future the school district does end up working out some kind of arrangement with the zoo for these ball fields, there would still be a need for a second field for JV and lower levels. So these upgrades help. We've been playing there for already 6 years, and this is the first time we're doing a joint venture to improve the grounds. So we received some quotes. I'm asking that the board or the school district will cover the cost of new fencing, and the village will handle all concrete work, demolition, supervise the fencing installation, so that we have some dugouts, appropriate backstop height, and height covering the spectators and students in the dugout so that no foul balls or anything, nobody's at risk. And I spoke with the Director of Public Works this morning. We're tentatively scheduled to start this October 17th, so it will be ready for the upcoming season this spring. I have no additional updates in regards to finance, personnel, or policy.
Move on to the principal's report. Are there any questions before we move on? Then we'll move on to the principal's report.
Okay. Last week during Spirit Week, we also held an activity fair before school and during lunch periods on Thursday. It was student run and it generated a lot of student interest, so we hope that students continue to come out for the clubs and activities that we have here at RB. Next Tuesday, October 2nd, is our first of 2 practice SAT tests for juniors. The second practice test is scheduled in February, and both tests prepare students for taking the state-funded SAT in April. This year will be the first year that we're only giving the SAT. We're no longer giving both. October 13th, it's hard to believe that is the placement test for 8th grade students already. So we're already planning for the class of 2023. But students must be currently living in the district and have signed up through our student information system, Skyward, in order to take the placement test on October 13th. We have been busy sending out reminders for required immunizations and physical exams for freshmen, and students that don't comply with the state requirement by October 15th will be excluded from school. So we hope to have very few students that fall into that category.
How many people is it now at this point?
I don't know the exact number at this point, but with the addition of our school health secretary last year, we were able to significantly get that down, having 2 people in the health office.
Okay.
So we hope to get it down very low. In conjunction with the PTO, we'll be holding a free viewing of the documentary Screenagers. Screenagers reveals how tech time impacts kids' development and offers solutions on how adults can empower students to navigate the digital world and find balance in their lives. Our viewing of Screenagers will be held on Tuesday, October 16th at 7 p.m. in the auditorium. Freshmen and sophomores will also view the documentary during the school day and have a discussion about that during their English classes. For them, that will fulfill the state mandate of having a Digital Citizenship Day, also known as Internet Safety Day in the past. All students, though, are welcome to attend the evening screening with their parents. And while there's no charge for the event, we did send out a letter and ask parents to sign up in advance so we know how many parents to expect, because we did also reach out to the other, our feeder schools PTOs, and reached out to our feeder schools to invite those parents as well. So we anticipate hopefully a very good turnout. And then immediately following the viewing of the documentary, a discussion will be directed by our two assistant principals, Dave Mannon and Kylie Lindquist, following the movie. Tonight, I also have several reports for you. The first is the transfer report on page 6. So this report has been modified slightly from the format in the past to include information about special education students as requested. So as you can see, we had a total of 65 students transfer in and 36 transfer out for a net gain of 29 students. This year we had a total of 7 students with IEP transfers in and 8 students with IEPs transfer out. So we actually lost one. But as you go back through the years past, you can see it's pretty much been a wash each year with a number of IEP students gained and a number of IEP students lost. Moving on to the next section, this is a lot of information, but our projected enrollment for this school year was 1,642 students. The current enrollment is 1,657 students. So of the 1,657 students, 21 students are outplaced, meaning they're special education students that are enrolled at RB but don't physically attend classes here. In addition to that, we have 15 students that are a part of the transition program. And so when you subtract those from the total enrollment, we have 1,621 students. And we refer to that as in-house at RB. And so the projected in-house enrollment was 1,621 students, so we were right on what we projected, and that's the number that we use to build our staffing projections to determine the FTE for the school year. I believe I answered all the questions that were submitted on that, but are there any other questions in regards to that report?
Yeah, I still, which line is what we budgeted for?
The 1,621 students, the projected in-house enrollment. So we give you both numbers in that report, but we
Okay.
take the initial number and we always back out an estimate for the outplaced students and the transition students. And then that's the number we budget for.
And then the projected total enrollment, that's, so the 21 different there, that's including outplaced?
Mm-hmm.
Then the transition students, are they considered in-house?
We don't consider them in-house. They physically are here for part of the day, but they push out and have job placements and other things, and they typically don't impact our FTE. So we don't include them in our in-house number.
Then why is the difference the 21 and not 36? Or what? Then what's the 15 underneath? The difference between total enrollment, actual and projected?
So it's the difference between the 1,657 students versus what we projected, the 1,642. So we always, in November, we give 2 projections. We give the total enrollment, and then we give the enrollment that we need for FTE.
Okay. But isn't I still don't understand why it's not 36 difference instead of 21 different. If the 21 are outplaced and 15 are transition, why isn't the difference 36 then?
It is, and so that's the 1657 minus the 36 gives you the 1621. But you have to, when you're making comparisons, and this is where the chart's a little confusing, you want to compare in-house enrollment to projected in-house enrollment and
Okay.
enrollment in September versus projected total enrollment.
Okay.
Long story short, we budgeted for roughly 1621 and 104.6 teachers, and that's right around where we came in.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Next, Kylie Lindquist, Assistant Principal of Curriculum and Instruction, will report out on our final district goals, which are ACT and advanced placement. She'll also provide some additional information regarding SAT performance. And then following those reports, she has some additional informational items on curriculum and textbooks. So at this point, I'll turn it over to Kylie.
And by then, you'll be really done hearing from me. Good evening, everybody. So I want to, I'm going to go through The last goals report kind of point by point, and there were a handful of questions that were submitted that I'm going to do my best to kind of thread within my talking points, but I'll pause at the end of each section to give you an opportunity to ask questions.
What page do you want to start on, Kylie? Is it your chart?
Page 9.
I think it's page 9, yeah, with the first performance indicator. So one of the things that I want to say out front before I dig too far into this is that the data that I'm going to present tonight across the board is one story of one snapshot in time. So we're talking about the snapshot being whatever date the students tested on. And while not all of the information that I present tonight might necessarily be what the Board of Education considers to be good news, what I'm going to do my best to do is show you that piece of education that is the reflective piece, where we look at when something doesn't work necessarily the way that we had hoped it would, how do we then progress from there, and how do we dig in and figure out, number one, why didn't it work, and number two, what are we going to do next time to make sure that it does work. So throughout this presentation, I'm going to share with you some of what we have done already and some of what we are planning to continue to do. As a leadership team and as a teaching staff, these are our scores. These are our students. And so we're meeting this data head on, and we are letting the data inform how we proceed from here. So while the bar is ever changing, because year over year, and the educators on the board will know this, we have new students every single year. And so while my team is looking right now at the data from last year and saying, why is this data why it is, what it is, and what are we going to do better, we already have new students who are ready to make new data sitting in front of us. So when we look at year over year, I ask you that you keep in mind that year over year we're not comparing apples to apples, because the students in each of these cohorts are very different, which is why I'm often gonna push you toward the growth story, so that we can really tell the story of what our students do against their own performance. So the first thing I want to mention is that ACT scores in this document are calculated from the class of 2018's junior year. Typically, we report on Explore to the senior year. ACT recently went to online reporting, which is not a surprise for us, but what that did was it impacted their ability to send us the report that we normally would get. We normally would get a report on the graduating class. They haven't sent that to us yet. We're expecting that to arrive at the superintendent's office mid-October, is what we're being told from ACT. But the reason that you're gonna see when we get to that EPAS growth chart, the score look exactly like it did when they took it as juniors, is because this is still their junior data, even though normally we would report on their senior data.
So the board understands, let me intercept real quick, is that the ACT allows a student to take the test as many times as possible. And when they report out a composite ACT score as applies to this goal for the graduating class, it takes into consideration the student's highest. So if a student took it as a junior and didn't do well, or had a bad testing day and took it again as a senior in September or October and scored better, that number is figured into our composite. So any senior that graduated last May that took their senior ACT score, if they improved it, it could help improve this final number.
Yes, so when we get that report,
data.
Yes, in mid-October when we get that report, it's possible that these numbers will adjust for that class of 2018 because we're not reporting their senior data.
We haven't never seen more than a 0.1, 0.2 increase, Kristen?
0.3 was our biggest, but typically it's 0.1 increase.
Okay.
So it won't be a significant jump, but we want to put that out there because that was a question about where the scores are coming from. So when you look at that composite ACT score first, you're looking at an average composite ACT score for the class of 2018 at a 22.1. And if you look historically across that chart, and I even have some numbers going back further than 2012 in my notes, you're going to see that 22 point something is kind of holding steady. The anomaly year, really, when you look at the data historically, looks like that 2015 year as the anomaly year. And for me, when I look at historical data, especially since 2010 was the first year that students with IEPs
and who received extended time and accommodations. 2010 was the first year that those scores ever factored in to a composite ACT score from a school. And so from that point on, what we're seeing is holding steady at that 22 despite a wide variety of factors that have implications on test performance in a variety of schools. Changing landscape of a student demographic, the number of students that we see coming in who are receiving accommodations, who are receiving 504 supports, down to the number of students who are hospitalized and outplaced for significant portions of their school. So when I look as an educator at 22.1, while it's not hitting that graduation rate or that ACT score of 26, what I'm seeing historically year over year with the growing challenges and the growing factors that we have in our building, I see that as a victory. One example of that is when we look at this data, one of the things that I did was dig into this class deeper and say, what was it about this class that might have gotten us to a 22.1 versus something higher? And I was able to find out that of the graduating class of 2018, 117 of them at some point came to us from a different place. So over the course of 4 years, whether it be a transfer student as a freshman or as a sophomore, in 2018, we actually had a pretty big number of students that transferred in as juniors, which isn't necessarily typical. We usually see them transferring in as freshmen. We're looking at a quarter of the class who are coming to us from institutions with which we do not articulate, and we do not have any impact on what they do and what their academic trajectory is. Now, no matter where our students come from and no matter when they come to us, as soon as they walk in this door, they're Bulldogs. So we own those scores, whether they came from Hauser, Gross, Comaric, or whether they came from a school in a different state. But what we do know, and one of the things that we've learned is, okay, if we've got 117 of a graduating class that came to us from another system, we need to be more intentional about the supports we put around transfer students. And we need to really look at how do we support students who come from systems that aren't impacted by our articulation. And what do we do when we talk about improvement that is wrapping up those transfer students and really filling in the gaps that might exist because they When I look at this data, I am always going to be driven to the EPAS growth. As an educator, that is the story that most significantly tells what we are able to achieve with our students. And I've indicated that before when I have presented here. And when you look at that second chart on page 9 where the EPAS growth line is, 5.23 is something to celebrate, and that's significant. ACT itself only says that their expected growth on their own test is 5 points for students who come in college ready. So for students who are coming in at benchmark, ACT says those students should reach 5 points of growth. For students that don't come in college ready, and in this particular class, we are talking about 36.4 of them who didn't come in meeting Explore benchmark. The expected growth, ACT expected growth, is 3.9 points. So with a quarter of our class coming in from another place and 36% of them coming in below benchmark, to be able to come out and say, in the class of 2018, we were able to achieve 5.23 points of growth, which exceeds ACT's own expectation of the growth on their test, that's a big deal. And that's something that we need to look at. How do we increase that number? Absolutely. But we also need to acknowledge that we are seeing, when we're looking at just apples, we are seeing our ability to move student scores in the right direction, even in excess of what ACT says that we should be able to do with their test.
Can I challenge you on that?
Mm-hmm, of course.
Let's compare ourselves to ourselves. First of all, ACT's growth is based on the average students in the whole country, right?
They actually, yeah, they did a growth study in
So we don't
2009. It was
consider ourselves an average
150,000.
high school in the United States, do we?
No.
So we keep, when we have a growth like this, we say we're better than ACT, and ACT says here's average. And we don't feel like we're putting feel like we're providing much greater resources, and we have much higher quality students than an average. But more importantly, look how we compared to ourselves over the last 6 years. Compared to ourselves, we had a bad year.
I'm not going to disagree with you
But
in
you're not
terms of.
saying that. And the problem is, as a board member, we're presented with spend money on this, spend money on this, spend money on this, and we're going to improve our students more. So yes, we can tell everybody we did great compared to the average student in the United States, but we did pretty poorly versus ourselves, right? And again, you take into factors different classes or different students.
Sure.
I understand all that.
But the growth is lower.
The growth
Yes.
is significantly lower
growth is
actually
lower.
than year. So again, I have a trouble that we're putting this glowing, we did better than the average student in the United, we did better than the average student in average high school in the United States, because we don't consider ourselves an average high school. We put a lot more money into it, our resources than average high school. So when I hear this, part of it is, how come we did poorly versus our own success in the past?
And that's our charge now.
Yeah.
That is, and as we go through and we look at college readiness benchmarks, we're going to talk about this again as it pertains to particular contents. And know that we recognize that we want to be higher than a 22.1, but we have to go into anytime we're trying to
Well,
improve.
let's not change it. Let's stay in what if you just want to talk about growth, I don't have a problem. But the growth was our worst by far that we've had in the last 6 years.
Sure.
If we grew on the average, and I don't even know what it is because the math isn't here, but it's probably somewhere around 5.6 or 5.7, our ACT scores would have been pretty close to what they were last year. If the growth was similar to the average, it'd be like 5.0 higher. So you got to help both color that and explain to the board why what we're doing makes sense, because it's a little difficult as a non-educator kind of a person to sit here and say, well, we keep doing what you ask. You say we're going to improve the growth, and we didn't. We had a bad year.
Right. When you look at year over year, a 5.82 for the class of 2017 versus a 5.23 for the class of 2018, yes, that's definitely lower growth. But from an educational standpoint, you have to consider the factors that go into what makes each of those classes unique.
But we
And I'm
started
not-
higher, though. 2018 started a higher Explore than last year's group.
Yeah, so we
Right.
have to identify, that's our charge.
Because
And-
one of the points you made is when we start lower, the expected growth isn't as great. But we actually started higher than last year.
Correct. Again, that's the charge that we have. That's where essentially where the rubber meets the road, and that's where my teams and I have to dig in, and we have to figure out what was it about this year, what is it about what we're doing right now that is not yielding the growth that we want to see year over year. And that's our charge. That's something we've already started doing, and that's the challenge of the fact that you don't get the scores until the next time you go in, because now we're flying the plane, but we're getting out our wrench and we're figuring out what it is that's not making it as efficient as we want it to be, because we do want it to be more efficient. So that's part of, as I go through and I talk about some of the plans that we have to move forward, that's part of that charge. So that we can see what is it about this year, where are the gaps that we can, and where can we look, not only in our own programming, but in our feeder school programming, where can we all figure out where we can win, which students are not experiencing the growth that we want them to experience, and isolating those particular
Can
issues.
I interrupt for a second? And I don't want you to think I'm making excuses, right? But first of all, I think it may have been Thomas Jefferson, but like
education in this modern era is like the greatest ongoing experiment. Like public education in America is a great ongoing experiment. That's one thing. We try things, they fail. We try, we fail. I think what I'm really looking forward to hearing you talk about is like the reflection piece, and that's huge for Kylie to do with her staff is like, and Kristen, you know, again, filling in those gaps. Behind these numbers are kids, and teaching right now is hard business. These kids, I mean, that's why we added another social worker, and again, I'm not making excuses, but there is some celebration on their part that needs to be had because it's hard work, and I totally understand what you're saying. You ask us, you know, to spend money, but as a fellow educator, let's celebrate some success, and they did that, and that's what she's talking about, and now we're going to move on to the hard business of figuring out how to do better.
Except that my point is, it didn't get a lot harder to teach last year's classes than the year before.
As far as testing, I might disagree with you
Well,
on that.
explain to me, because
Last year was a year where when these students sat down to take their ACT, they had been practice tested twice on the ACT and they had already taken an SAT as well. So we're talking about a class that has been tested and tested and tested and tested again. And one of the things that I was talking, because I've been trying to triangulate it and really bring in everyone from our leadership team to talk about this. One of the things I was talking to Beth Augustine about was the challenge that it presents that so many colleges are going test optional now. And she said, right away, she said, students know that it used to be the carrot was, do you want to go to college? Get this ACT score, and you're going to be able to go to college. And now colleges are starting to say, you don't need the test to go to college. And students are getting wise to that. And as a person who for 10 years I taught test prep, and I'm not trying to make excuses either, but test fatigue is a real thing. It's 100% a real thing, and by the time a student is taking their actual ACT, but it's the 5th time they've sat in a room and done a standardized test, does that potentially have an impact on their score? I think it does, absolutely. And I think we would be, I think year over year, it does get harder to teach the students that we see as they come in. That doesn't mean that we don't need to work harder on the back end to figure out, okay, if it's gonna get harder, then what do we have to do to ramp up how we support these students and ramp up how we reach them? But there are some anomalies about the couple of years where we're gonna be giving kids multiple ACT and multiple SAT tests within the same year. There are not a lot of schools that, once Illinois said, we're only gonna measure you by SAT, the average school said, okay, we're only gonna give an SAT. But we felt the value in providing students with both of those options. That, in my opinion, as an educator, does have a potential to impact that. But it doesn't negate the hard work that we have to do, because we still wanna see more than that percentage of growth coming in.
But I thought we gave the same number, we funded the same number of tests for the last several years, haven't we, Kristen?
There were 2 years where we overlapped, this being the first, I believe, where students took an SAT and an ACT. The class of 2019, our current seniors also took both. And there's only those 2 classes.
Okay.
But as a result, we were trying to prepare students for both assessments.
Okay, so the last couple.
So this is the first class that's ever taken both, this data that you're seeing.
And it is, you brought that to our attention previously with other tests where the kids just weren't really incented, they didn't care.
Yeah, and I think
So
that's,
I buy into. If they don't think they need it for college, they're not gonna work as hard on it.
Sure.
Right?
and that's where you see the difference between, in my opinion, the ACT performance and the AP performance, which continues to do well, because there still is a big incentive for AP performance. You get college credit.
Right.
You know, every now and then you get a student who knows they're going to a college that doesn't accept that credit, but that's pretty rare. And so AP, Kylie will share in a minute, we've had great results with that and continue to do so because there still is a huge incentive for students.
Okay, thank you.
Kelly, let's move on to the second page, your page 10. Let's get into
College readiness.
Yeah, well, I
I'm
think
sorry.
that's, okay.
Can I ask a question? Okay, so obviously you need to dig into this data more. Have you looked in as like quartiles or top 10%, top to bottom 10%, and look at these numbers and how they've changed? Can you get that data?
I will have to see how ACT is going to provide us with the data, because right now we are strictly getting this information in the form of the spreadsheet that we get from ACT. It's not the report that they typically give us. And with the new online system, I'm not sure what that's going to look like. I'm not positive. With SAT, the data is much easier to access and easier to filter through and easier to see. So I'm hoping that the ACT data will be more useful like that. But right now, until I get that report in mid-October, I'm not going to know what that's going to look like.
John, just to clarify, you're asking for just each of the 4 quartiles and how they perform in terms of EPAS growth or composite ACT? What specifically are you looking for?
All that data, all the data we
okay.
see here.
So
And
how
even,
each quartile
even top
performs.
10% would be useful. I mean, the reason I say this, you guys probably can think the same way. If there's one section or quartile where we're doing well,
Yes.
not doing well, what do we have to focus on? You can sort of split up, maybe look at it in more detail.
Right, typically we call that, right, we work with the boost group, right, the ones we think we can get over the hump.
The bubble kids, as we
Right,
always call
right.
them. Yep. Yep.
Because, you know, if the top 10% of our students are excelling, then the community needs to know that too.
Absolutely.
Well, and means are susceptible to outliers. And so when you're only describing your entire student body by a single mean score.
Right.
So it would be informative to kind of break out your quartiles.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
That's something ECRA would do with.
Yeah, I
think so.
ACRA in the past has given us data how if you come in with this Explore score, here's how our kids have done. So they could easily put together quartiles and top 10% for us.
He's already said you're considering different ways to look at the data to see what we should do, right?
Yes.
Okay.
And that's absolutely one of them.
Okay.
Thank you, Dr.
Thank you.
Absolutely. So if we're looking at page 10, we're looking at the college readiness benchmarks there. And you're going to see what Mr. Walsh was speaking to already. You're going to see numbers that are not only going down year over year, but you're going to see when I look at 2018 and I look at how the students came in, we're losing some students. And we have to address that. And particularly, we have to address it in math. And right now, my math instructional coach and I are probably looking at this data more closely than anyone else, because our math department takes those scores very seriously. And it's not only a reflection of their practice, but it's a reflection of our building as a whole and the efforts that we put all together behind, you know, when we look at SAT, they're looking at math and reading. And so those kind of emerge as really the forefront of every discussion that we have. So we need to examine how we are losing a little bit of ground when we talk about a certain percentage of our students coming in college ready at the Explore benchmark. Yes, the benchmark is a sliding scale, but we should be able to keep them on track so that they stay on benchmark and that so we get more kids meeting benchmarks. So we are looking most closely at math, but we're looking across the board, even in the places where we're seeing some increased growth, because we are seeing some increased growth in reading. In our building, reading has typically been an initiative that every person in the building is pulling on. Every person in this building does academic vocabulary. There are academic vocabulary words hanging in the wellness center, and my PE teachers are using those words in their directions and having kids talk about what they're doing using those words. We have an all hands on deck throughout the building effort around reading. And so what do we see? On our reading scores, we see that reading is the area where our kids are getting the growth, and we're not losing those kids from the point where they come in 8th grade to when they get to us in junior year. Our literacy coaches have done a fantastic job pushing into our content areas and supporting our contents to support reading. Now we have to figure out what that looks like in math. one of the things that we've already done before any of this data was even available to us is that we now have an algebra-infused academic support course. So we have invested FTE into an actual math teacher who pushes into our academic support for students who are not at benchmark in math. The feedback that I'm receiving already from our algebra teachers when they have their students come back into algebra after they've worked with our academic support algebra pull-out teacher is they're knocking it out of the park. They're coming in having been retaught, having had review, having had some additional intervention work with Mrs. Sherman. They're coming into algebra more ready to receive that curriculum, more supported in receipt of that curriculum. So we're already on September 25th, our algebra teachers are already seeing gains that are being made by Mrs. Sherman going into those few academic support classes where we have placed her to support those students. So that's something we're already doing. Do we need to look at doing that on a more broad scale? Possibly. Do we need to look at our curriculum in mathematics and how it aligns to college readiness? Absolutely. Our math department is already doing that. In fact, I sat my instructional coach for math down right after we got these scores, and I said, tell me what you need. I said, my job is to support you. These scores aren't where we want them to be. I know they're not where you want them to be. Tell me what you need. And the first thing she said is time, because it makes such a difference for a room of math teachers all together to have concentrated, dedicated time to look at the Common Core standards and compare those standards against their curriculum, and then to look at the data that they have and to start looking at individual students and see where are we missing these students? What are the skills on this ACT that they are missing? And then where are those skills in our content? So how do we support those skills in their content? So we are subbing out our entire math department and we're putting them in a war room together so that I can support that conversation and that analysis, that gap analysis. Where is the gap between the skills that ACT or SAT, because that's going to be what we're held accountable to on the state report card, where are we missing? And then even more importantly, in my opinion, once we start looking at in our building level, how do we make our articulation with our feeder schools more meaningful and more robust? So how do we translate that vertical alignment to our feeder schools? Prior to even getting this data, the curriculum directors at the feeders, Dr. Brownlow, Dr. Gold at Comaric, Mrs. Cannon at Gross, and I have been sitting down and we have been talking, all of us, about implementing a 612 vertical articulation team, which can be challenging when you're not a unit district, but our feeder schools are on board. They are ready to go. They are excited about this work.
Could you translate that?
Say that again?
So, okay, go ahead.
Translate, which part, Doctor?
What do you mean by the 6 through 12 articulation?
curriculum
Okay, 6 through 12
alignment.
articulation. Okay, so we take care of the 9-12, and so I can put into a room a math teacher from algebra, from geometry, from algebra 2 trig, and let's say from calc to represent 9, 10, 11, 12 at our school. And they can sit in a room and they can say, does our curriculum align vertically? In other words, does everything that we do at the freshman year appropriately support what they need to do at the sophomore year so that they grow and there are no gaps between what we want them to know in geo and what they get in algebra? However, that only works for what we're doing here. So when we communicated with the feeder schools and I said, hey, I want to put together vertical teams in my building. Do you want to get in on this? And let's make them 612. They were 100% for it. And that is the chart that I know I hate to skip around, but on page 15 of your board doc, you saw a vertical alignment timeline chart. And that is one of the things that came out of meeting with those curriculum directors at the feeder schools. Because what we plan to do is, number one, look at our own curriculum vertically this year and see where our own gaps are, but then bring 6th, 7th, and 8th grade teams to the table and do it more than once a year in February, because it should be an ongoing conversation so that we can look at, okay, here are all the things that we need kids to be ready to do. How does the foundation at grade 8 and grade 7 and grade 6 help us prepare to do that? It's going to involve some of us really educating the feeder schools about our assessments because they don't live in our assessment world. It's also going to involve our feeder schools educating us on the assessments that drive them. So triangulating data between MAP, between PARC, between PSAT and SAT, so that not only do we have a curriculum that addresses college readiness 9 through 12, we've extended that program so that we will have a program that addresses 6 through 12. Vertical articulation. When ACT put out their study in 2009, they flat out said the thing that makes the biggest difference to success on an ACT test your junior year is what happens before you even get to high school. And so that's why we want to extend that conversation down so that we're all on the same page and we are all pulling on the same rope in a way that we haven't done before. And so this timeline represents how we're going to move forward in that. And again, this is something that we wanted to do before we even saw this data because it's best practice. And even though we don't have a unit district, we can create those kind of conversations because we have feeder schools who are excited and are ready to partner with us. And that's going to be some really important foundational work. Because at the end of the day, that's what we want, is the foundation that no matter what the metric is, if it's ACT, if it's SAT, whatever it is, the foundation is there so that we do maximize that growth, like you were talking about. And we perform higher than an average high school because that's how we view ourselves and that's the service that we want to provide to the families who entrust us with their kids. So that's where that's what that vertical alignment conversation is referring to, and that's why I pulled that chart a little earlier than I had intended to, because I want you to see the progress and the partnerships that we're really developing, because it's something that we are excited about, and regardless of the scores, something that we needed to do anyway to make our programming better around our students.
The tough thing for the board to understand is that sometimes the benefits won't be seen though. If we start doing this now and we're working with the 6th graders at Gross, we won't see the impact on the test scores for 5 years, 6 years.
Right.
If I know it's a problem, and we're starting
to do it now.
Yes.
Absolutely.
For sure.
You can
And then
support
It should
that
help because, I mean,
conversation.
according to your chart, about 20% of our kids from feeder schools go into extended algebra.
Yes.
No more than 38% of our kids go into honor, so
Right.
Well,
it should help.
It's huge
improving
though,
that
right? Because
articulation.
they can tell you they're unpacking the standards all they want, but that could be lip service because you don't know what their curriculum director is doing. Like, the way that different districts view unpacking the standards
certainly.
very differently.
Certainly.
Right? Like, some of them are like, did you read them? Okay, you unpacked them.
right?
You know,
Yeah.
and others are like, okay, we're gonna take, this, and then the sub, and we're gonna backwards design and look at the
And
test.
that's what we're looking at doing.
Right?
And that's where our feeder schools, that's what they're
And that's
thinking about with
huge.
their
That's
curriculums.
huge.
Backward designing from the Common Core standards, and that is what we are
And
planning on
then
doing
it should
as
hold
well.
true that if those curriculum directors are doing their jobs right, that it trickles all the way back down to K, because.
Sure.
Right? I
Sure.
mean,
Absolutely.
in theory.
In theory, that's the intention of any kind of good backward
Right.
design, absolutely. And so when we talk about unpacking the standards and, for the people who aren't educational E's, really we are talking about, when I'm with the feeder school curriculum people, we are talking about looking at each standard,
And the
each subset
substandard,
of
right.
that standard, and isolating, where do we do this? At 6th grade, at 7th grade, at 8th grade, at 9th grade, where does it happen? And I always lead those conversations with, where are we introducing a standard? Where are we marinating on a standard? And where do we expect a student to have mastery of that standard? And how does that spiral through a program? And so that's what we're looking at first in isolation, so we'll do it in their buildings and in our building, and then we're gonna bring those teams together with representatives from each grade level, so it's a smaller team, it's a smaller setting, to really then go, okay, here's where we're doing it, here's where we're doing it, now those have to talk. Those have to come together in ways that they haven't before.
Are you only gonna do that for math?
No, we're starting with math and English, because those are, again, those SAT core. So we're starting with both. We figured we could handle doing them both at the same time. And then I know that they are excited to bring other contents on board as we go through that as well.
Kylie, can you touch on the AP data now?
Let me ask one more question
Yeah.
before we go into that. When we talked about the growth,
Mhm.
we're matching it against the Explorer for
Yes.
the 8th grade.
Mhm.
Does the 8th grade Explorer, is it broken down into subject groups too, like math, science, English?
Yes.
And do they also provide what the benchmark is for college readiness for 8th grade?
Yes.
Do you compare it that way too? I mean, you didn't give it to us, but do you look and see how did our growth do, unless I read it wrong, hold on, now you might tell me I read it wrong, but. Oh, so that's the chart.
That's a big point.
On the bottom of the other page, we show what our growth was.
Which page are you on?
On
Mr.
page
Walsh?
9.
On page 9?
So the growth by subject
Yes.
is there. That's
Yes.
that's from their 8th grade.
Yes, that's from their 8th grade Explorer through their junior, broken down by subject.
So I didn't, we skipped over that one when we were coming here, but then we're showing that interest, that, subject by subject, we're doing well in reading and math relatively. And then math not as, reading and English, math not as well, science not as well.
And interestingly, that ACT study, that growth study where ACT used to set their benchmarks, interestingly mirrors that exact fallout where science sees the least amount of growth in that study, then math, and then reading. Our reading and English are flipped. So the ACT study shows typically the highest growth in reading, where on this chart you can see that our English edged out our reading
And that can be
a little
traced
bit.
back to the fact that the state of Illinois stopped testing for science at some point.
Yes.
When we switched from ISAT to PARC,
Mm-hmm.
or in and around that 2008, 2009,
Yeah.
somewhere
Yes,
around
8, 9
there, and
sounds right.
and maybe 10, but like when when the mark kept moving for us in
Mhm.
elementary,
Mhm.
right, and that there was the fallback then here in high school, right, because we stopped concentrating on it so much because it wasn't tested. At
Right.
least that was my experience.
Sure.
Can I ask you just a fast question? I just want to make sure that I understand this. So you're looking at the Explore 8th grade, 2018, 16.87. But did you not say that 117 kiddos were transferred in completely new to us? So are
it's-
those 117 kids not included, right? Like those aren't
Not necessarily.
those 8th
No.
graders? So when we look at from the growth from the 8th grade to the ACT, a quarter of the kids, right, can't be accounted for from Explore to ACT.
Right.
100%
Right?
of the line.
Listen to, she answered your
Right.
question, answer it again, Kyle.
No, I think you're right.
No, not
Let-
necessarily,
let her answer the
because
question.
Hold on.
every 8th grader that transfers in as a freshman, which is a majority of our transfer population,
Would be there.
comes in and they take an Explore test that we give them.
Oh, all
So,
8th grades,
yes.
everywhere, every
So regardless
district.
of whether they came from our feeder
Okay,
school or
that's
not,
what-
when
yeah,
they
that's
walk
what
in
I
the
was-
Sophomore,
building, we give
junior,
them.
senior.
So
That
that's
sometimes
who
we
wouldn't
have
be
a-
in here.
And sometimes they are if we have an Explore
Sure.
score,
Okay.
and sometimes they're not. So it's a lot less than a quarter of the students.
Right.
Okay, yeah, I just want to make sure we're comparing, like you said, like apples
Right.
to apples,
Yeah.
and make sure. Okay.
Most of
I
them
got
should
it.
be there, because like Kristen said, we get most of the transfer-ins at the freshman year, and then we give them that
Okay,
test.
got it, thank you.
One of the things as you start to do your 6 to 12 vertical articulation, as we lose students along the pathway and we gain students along the pathway, 6 years down the road, it might be insightful to look at the core students who were with us the entire 6 years.
That would be interesting, right?
Right, because as opposed to those who join us, particularly those who
Right.
join us sophomore, junior year.
Yeah, the growth of like the homegrown students. the
Right.
ones
From that
we've
6
owned
to
the whole
12, you're
time.
talking, you're
Right.
going all the way.
Right.
Right,
Okay,
that core.
absolutely.
That
That
would be
core that
interesting.
have been part, who have been able to take advantage of that program.
That's a great point. Ms. Ruska, thank you.
Yeah, and I want to make a point of encouragement too, guys. I know the math department sees their challenge, and they're definitely
Absolutely.
up for it.
Yes, they are.
But I think we have a very robust mathematics department, and we have tremendous instructors in our group.
We do.
So I am
Agree.
sure that they are scratching their heads,
Yes.
what happened here? And they will definitely figure it out.
Oh, they're
so.
ready to dig in. They're,
I mean, I
and
think-
like Kristen said,
yes.
some of our highest population of students who take AP courses are at the math
Yes.
level. We have students who enter in extended algebra and are sitting in Lindsay Minot's AP Stats course by the
Right.
time they leave. So you're 100% right. They are up for the challenge. They are ready to figure it out, and we're going to figure it out.
Yeah,
I have no
we
doubt
have a
in my mind.
robust mathematics department compared to other high schools, and our faculty are well-trained, so definitely an anomaly, something quite a challenge.
To the AP now.
Yes.
Thanks.
So the first AP section you're going to see are the AP students with passing scores. And so you can see that for the graduating class, 73.5% of the AP students graduated having earned a score of a 3 or higher. Now, there was a question, one of the questions that was submitted was, again, about, when you look year over year, we're looking at scores that are going down year over year. And AP is one of the challenges in reporting data because we have two conflicting goals in AP. We want to give as many students as possible access to AP because that's College Board's philosophy, that every student should have the benefit of being able to take an AP course. And so while we're wanting more and more students to have access to AP, we're also wanting the excellence to come with that. But the reality is, the more we increase students taking AP, the more we have a chance that our scores could take that little bit of a dip. Because when we are gathering up more AP students, and we were able to encourage 51 more students to take AP last year than in previous years, and last year it was 40 more than the year before that. We're talking 140 more exams. These are kids that are stretching. These are kids that I am going to teachers and I am saying, who in your classes do you think might be able to hack it in an AP course? Because it's college level work. And with the open access philosophy that College Board has, what College Board is saying is, even if a student goes into an AP class and they don't get that 3, they don't pass that test, they have just increased their likelihood of being successful in a college level course, because in theory they're experiencing the college level course, because that is what AP coursework is supposed to be, and that is the experience that our AP teachers are providing. So when I see that there were 51 more AP students, that's 51 students that a teacher looked at a kid and said, I believe you can do this. I believe you can stretch your abilities to come into this class every day and work like you're in a college level course. A lot of our students, for example, who take AP Macro and Micro, where we have a huge student population taking AP Macro and Micro at the sophomore level, that's their first entrance into an AP course. Or our students who take an AP Environmental Science class, for example. Some of our students who take AP Environmental Science or AP Psych, that's the first course they've ever taken, because those courses are a little bit more accessible. That's why we support successes in classes like AP Spanish Literature being 100% pass rate. Students who have taken AP Spanish Literature have taken another AP course 9 times out of 10. They've taken AP Spanish Lang. 100% pass rate in our Calc BC class. That's a huge feat. Those kids likely have taken another AP course at some point. The average student doesn't wake up their senior year and go, you know what, I want my first AP course to be Calc BC, because that's a really challenging course to go into. So what we're seeing is 51 students who may have never taken an AP course unless a teacher went up to them and said, I believe in you and I think you can do this. So did our percentage go down? Yes. But the fact that we found 51 more kids who were willing to stretch themselves and go into an AP course is a celebration. Not every high school allows open access to all of their classes, especially in math. And we do, because we want kids to have that rigorous experience. And believe me, I was an AP teacher for a lot of years, and I had kids in my class every year who got 2s that they fought tooth and nail to get that 2. And I was singing their praises for getting that 2, or even just lasting through the class, because those classes are rigorous. You know, we have students here in AP Computer Science Principles and AP Chemistry who are earning credit at Loyola for getting into those classes dual credit. This is rigorous coursework. And so while we have plans to improve, like bringing Albert in for test prep, and through attending the Westmont AP Consortium, I met a man who has taught more AP courses than any one person should ever teach across multiple English, math, science, looking at bringing him in because he has been able to isolate what skills are transferable across all of these tests, because there are commonalities. So while we have plans to improve, my goal is also always going to be find more kids who are willing to stretch themselves and go into AP. And I go into that goal knowing that there's a possibility that that could make our percentage drop a little bit, but also knowing that the value of those students experiencing that AP class is one that, in my opinion, outweighs whether or not they are stretching and might not ever be able to get to that 3. So, you know, we have 137 students who got a perfect score on at least one of their exams. In 20 of the 24 subject area AP tests we give, there was at least one student who got a perfect score in all of them. So that tells us that our AP curriculum and our AP teachers are giving the students the experience that they need to score a passing score, and that some of those kids are stretching, and some of those kids are not going to get to that 5. But we can say when we've got 20 of our subjects with at least one kid that's getting that perfect score, that we're doing something right in those classes. And so we feel good about continuing to encourage more and more students to take the risk and take those courses, because the experience, like College Board's philosophy, is what we want them to get out of it. And then we, of course, want to continue to look at how do we design our curriculum in the best ways, continuous professional development every 3 years for teachers who are teaching AP courses, so that we can continue to grow that number of students who are not just sitting in the classes, but are passing those test scores and earning that college credit in their classes.
I'd like to add a comment. 14 years ago, when I was just on the board, that was a core philosophy of this school, to have open access to AP classes. And that was not permitted at most high schools that we can compete with or around. And that's when, in the early years, when our numbers of AP students were greater than other schools around. It was that open access, and it was that goal that every graduate from RB would try at least one AP class. So those have been the roots in this school, and I think it's a valuable route that they should be exposed to at least one. At least one, before you go to college and find out. Try.
And our teachers still really, truly, many of our teachers were here at that time and really still truly believe in the philosophy of open access. And, you know, our teachers who teach AP, they know their data is public, their names are attached to those scores, but they are still finding kids every day who they're saying, take the risk, come on, you know, don't worry about the test, let me help you, let me get you through this. And they're still bringing those kids into their classes. So they really do embody that open access philosophy 100%, and are willing to take on that challenge of, there are going to be some students, we talked about this when Lindsay and I were examining the math scores. There are students that are sitting in our AP math classes right now at the senior level who did not meet benchmark last year on their ACT math test or their SAT math test. But they are sitting in an AP course. They're willing to make that stretch. So we really do have a special place for that AP Open Access. Even if you are struggling, we want you to try it. And that's something that our teachers really stand by and that I encourage them to stand by.
And the colleges recognize the challenge too, right? Because
Absolutely.
they would look at two things. If you get the passing grade, most states, they require credit.
Yes.
But the colleges also look at did you take the most rigorous
Yes,
courses,
they do,
right?
100%.
And I will add, it's about the same time as Laura's talking about, when we were starting this, I had a daughter, took A, B, or BC, and nobody passed. Or
Oh,
maybe
wow.
one kid passed. So
Yeah.
you get, BC's the hardest math
Yes.
AP we teach.
Right, that's the hardest.
Yeah.
I get them.
It's a 96% passing rate's pretty
It's huge.
exceptional for that class, I
Absolutely,
would say.
absolutely.
I have a question for you.
Mhm.
So Morton had AP School of the Year or whatever, a year or two ago.
Mhm.
Do they award that to you? Do you apply for it? Do you know anything about that?
I'm not sure how that's awarded.
We might have gotten it years
honestly.
ago. I think it's based on the growth and the number of
students.
Number of
Classes.
students,
And
I
also
think.
looking at subgroups too now.
Yes, and Morton has
But didn't
fairly
we get
significant
Subgroups,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Right.
Vincent, you were at?
We did not get it while I was here.
I think we might have gotten
Look
it
into
years
that.
ago.
I will.
I just want to know what the criteria
No,
are.
absolutely. I will. I will find out.
Kylie, I know you got a couple other reports. I want to make sure we're touching on everything, but I also need you to continue to move through
Okay. So we're on the
equity and excellence.
equity and excellence number. So we are at page 11. Our goal, 75% of the graduating class with one AP exam passed at some point. We're at 52.1. So again, that's another number that, we are looking to increase. If you look historically, you can see that number sort of bounces all over the place. But again, all of the efforts that we put into bringing in more students has the ability to impact that number, but we're not shying away from that. We're still gonna bring in more students and we're gonna continue to work with each of those students to get them to the point where they feel like they can pass at least one exam at some point. And what I think we often see is that students who stay in and take multiple AP classes, that's where you start to see they sort of hit their stride. And they do have the ability then to achieve that passing score. So we're gonna look at how we can continue, again, to improve that pass rate and to really isolate the skills that are students who are receiving 3s, 4s, and 5s, isolate the things that those students are really good at. And so ACT really has a lot to do in terms of their online reporting. College Board is the same SAT reporting as AP reporting, and there's so much that we can dig in those AP scores and look at individual students, and that's what my instructional coaches right now in my 4 core areas are doing with AP in English, Math, Science, and Social Studies, really looking in and customizing the way that they can view AP reporting so they can start looking at individual kids, individual sections, and see what correlation there is between the successful kids and what's going on in the classroom so we can replicate that for those students who are stretching. Any questions AP-wise? So when we look at page 12 and we look at SAT data, the district still, we don't have the SAT goal yet, but we know that beginning with the graduating class of 2018, SAT data replaced the ACT data on that Illinois school report card. So what you see there is the state and national average SAT scores, as well as the data that we have from the 2 classes that we have given. So you can see not only are we outperforming benchmark, we're outperforming at both the state and the national level pretty significantly when you look at the ERW scores, the evidence-based reading and writing. When we look at an SAT setting a benchmark at 480 and we're performing at a 539, SAT does not give us a composite benchmark, so that's why whenever I give this report, you're not going to see anything there because SAT just doesn't report out on that. Again, those are averages.
Why don't they report on that one, do you know?
I'm not
Seems
sure.
kinda silly, doesn't it?
I'm not sure.
Okay, sorry.
I'm not sure, but now I want to find out. I will. And then you can see below You can see that SAT benchmark data. Again, we provided both the state and the national percentages of the students who are meeting both benchmarks, and then isolated out meeting the ERW versus the math. And the number that we really focus in on from a leadership standpoint is those students who are not meeting at any of those benchmarks. Why are they not meeting any of the benchmarks? What is it with their course taking patterns? What is it with their skill deficits? Where is it that we can start to make some inroads into those students? SAT's reporting is nice. I can pull exactly who those 28% of the students are by name very easily, and I can start to look at the student profile and the student makeup of who those students are, so that we can start to say, what was it about this student that we think might have missed? And we can have a more informed conversation around those students who aren't meeting any of those benchmarks yet. Any questions SAT-wise? Then I believe, next page is the next page in the board book, Kristen, the placement chart.
Yeah, that's just in there for board's information.
So that's the placement chart you have. I'm not going to touch on that. That's just in there for your information. It's something that Kristen has worked with ECRA to create so that we can help inform our feeder schools, and this is part of where that articulation conversation comes from, so they can see individually where all of their students are. And then we already did the vertical articulation document.
You addressed all the questions that were submitted, correct?
Yes, I believe I did.
I think she did all the ones I had made anyway.
Well, unless there's any other questions, maybe we can go on to the curriculum guide, because you have a couple other reports you gotta get, right?
Quick, just quick.
Okay.
Anybody have any other comments or questions?
No.
All right.
So the proposed changes to the curriculum guide are next. Most of this, actually all of it right now, is really informational at this point. The only proposed, and I put potential proposed, course addition on there because this transitional technical math is sort of in a limbo stage at this point. This course was designed through a partnership with Triton in response to a mandate from the state of Illinois for students to be prepared to move on and out of those low-level math classes when they go into college. And so one of the questions was, one, why don't we offer credit? Why don't the students get a math credit for this class? And that has to do with the state's mandate of this, that this class would only be put into place after the students have completed their 3-year progression in math. So that's something that we're going to be holding to the state on that. If this were something that we did put on the books and we did end up offering, which we don't know that we will, one of the activities at our DVR conference on November 2nd is a math summit that Kristen and our math teachers are going to be attending, so they can get more information about the state's expectations with regard to this, and we know really what we need to do here so that we don't pull a trigger that we don't need to pull. If we get into a place where we do have to put this on the books and offer it for students, it will cut into our FTE, and the struggle will be that it will be a very small class of students.
Another
So-
unfunded mandate by the state
Yes.
of Illinois.
Yep.
Shocking.
Absolutely.
Shocking.
Yes. So in the research that Kristen has done pretty extensively, there is, correct me if I'm wrong, Kristen, there is a pretty strong indication that the state might offer an online option or a way around offering this in particular, but we just don't know yet. So we wanted to put it in front of you so that you kind of have a heads up about the possibility. You love it, don't you?
Oh, gosh.
The other things that are
Cry
in
for the
that
course.
report, there's one course that we're proposing be removed from the curriculum guide simply because we haven't offered it. When our kids want to take journalism, they go to Rouser, they go to Clarion. And then we have 3 courses that we are just removing some prerequisite language to offer additional students access to those courses, and you can see that's digital art psychology and AP psychology, and I highlighted just what we were changing in terms of the prerequisite there. And then the last piece of that report is a change in sequence with AP Literature and AP Lang. When the state adopted SAT, it became very apparent that the skill set that students receive in AP language is better suited to support them on the SAT because of the argumentative writing piece, because of the nonfiction text that they encounter there. So that's why that switch was proposed, to more closely mirror the skills that will support students' success on the SAT assessment.
Has the curriculum council met to discuss these changes you're
Yes,
proposing?
we met at the end of.
You went through the process,
Yes,
and that's
at
where
the end
the
of
results.
last school year, yes. So this is something that Ms. Ruska and Ms. Towner have already seen.
Okay, thank you.
We put the transitional course on there in the event that after November 2nd, if we need to offer it for having our curriculum guide in the board, the curriculum guide's already printed, the board will have knowledge and will be aware that this is potential of something we have to add.
Okay.
The primary reason for this is there's a big push at the state level between junior colleges and community colleges, I shouldn't say junior colleges, community colleges and their local school districts to identify ways to help students transition into community college. Where community colleges are having some concern is that, and where the high schools are expressing concerns to community colleges, is that students could pass the ACT and be considered meeting ACT college readiness benchmarks, and then they take the entrance exam for, let's say, a Triton, and they could be placed in all remedial courses for non-credit bearing classes because their level of what they figure to be college ready is higher than ACT.
Oh.
And so what we're trying to get is some kind of level benchmarks or playing field to say, you know, this is where a student can be at in order to be college ready, even at the community college. So the idea of creating this math course was, instead of that student having to take a remedial class or a non-credit bearing at the college level, they could take it their senior year once they've achieved their 3 credits.
Yeah, I know a student that walked away rather than take remedial classes at Triton, right? And went out and got a job instead, because
Right.
they weren't going to be subjected to what they
Sure.
considered being subpar, right?
Sure. So that's why we wanted it there, so that you had a heads up in case we had to move quickly on that, based on the meeting that we have scheduled on November 2nd.
Textbooks kind
So the
of,
last piece is the textbook adoption plan update. The more formal report for this will happen in second semester. When I come back to the board to talk about the specific requests and bring the books for you to review. But we wanted to give you a forecast in terms of what kind of money we're looking at textbook-wise. When we look at something like the textbook licenses, we're talking about a 5-year license from Discovery Education. So when you see some higher numbers in some of these years, maybe than in past years for textbooks, it's for a couple of different reasons. One, we have some courses like our Spanish courses who haven't had new textbooks in 15 years. And then when we are moving more to the online platform and the digital platform, we're not able to use those resources for that long. So when we order Discovery Education textbooks, we have a license for 5 years. Once that 5 years is up, that's like buying a whole new set of textbooks again, where in the past we might have used them for 6 years or 7 years, or we might have pushed it to 15 years. So we're seeing with the onset of our online one-to-one initiative, the need to be able to replace those resources a little bit more frequently than we have in the past. But you're also then going to see that I'm not going to be coming to you and asking for biology, anything, again for 5 years. So we're putting up the cost up front, and then that should trickle off once we get everybody uploaded where they need to go.
Yeah, but the problem is what you said. Every other time you've done a presentation, we've had the book for 8, 10, 12, 15 years. Now we're getting 4- and 5-year licenses. Our book costs are going to skyrocket. They're going to double or triple.
As we
keep going to all
go
these
to more
electronic
and more
books,
online
right?
resources, they will. Yes,
Is
they
there a
will
way to
increase.
negotiate longer terms with these companies? Or do you have, after the 4 years, is the book still good, but then they don't support it if there's a problem with it?
That.
One of two things, like for example, our honors biology textbook, which was, when they started using it, it far predates me, I'm not positive the year. There was an online component that came to it, with it. And it was, Mr. Monti told me about this. The online component was really only supposed to be supported for 5 or 6 years, but they just never turned off the access.
Okay.
So up until this year, he's been using it still because he still had access to it and maybe didn't have the best updates or, you know, the newest information. But what we're finding with companies now is they either don't support you after a certain amount of years or they just turn off access. So Discovery Education, once that 6 year hits, our licenses won't be active anymore.
Well, somebody should talk to our attorney and try to negotiate the license so they don't maintain it after the years, but we still have access to it. Because they're controlling our, completely making us
Of our funding.
captive to, we have to buy new books every time the license is
Well,
up.
that's how the book industry is trying to catch up to
How
the
yeah.
electronic resources. The other idea is that one thing that they're doing is they're also updating the content more frequently.
Yes.
So when there are changes in
Yeah,
research or
But they're still, so they update the content. For 50, 70, 100 years, if you used a book for 10 years, they didn't tell you about the next war that came up in a history book. And it doesn't change the curriculum very much. You still want to get a little more control over your budget and deciding it. So if you bought a license, you should be able to use, you should try to be able to negotiate to use it, but they won't update it. Because there's no cost to them to have you access after the 5 years are up, right? You're not getting anything else. Do they update it during the 5 years?
Yes.
4
Yes.
years?
Yes. So if you know, a science textbook, physical science textbook, Fermilab comes up, you know, with something smaller than a quark, it'll be in there the next week, right?
Yes.
Like, that's what you're
it's
paying
real-time
for.
information.
I think
That's
based
something-
on what we
that's
talked
certainly
about so
something.
far, knowing the quirk that year instead of waiting for 4 years isn't going to affect our growth rates or keep kids getting into college or anything.
It's
That's
something.
my
Make the
guess.
difference.
see that- I see your
We
question there.
do see the increase, and it is something that we need to monitor.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
And there's you know, there's a couple of nuances. The math, again, the Carnegie license is up, so that's why you're seeing that FY20 increase so much. But that's certainly something that I'll look into in terms
Just-
of
just-
longer terms to kind of take back, like you said,
Do you think
control
it's
of our own budget.
100, on average, we weren't spending 100,000 a year over the last few years, on average. I mean,
When
we
I
had
first
years-
started, no, we
I mean,
I
it's
don't
the
know. When I
average
first
cost
I'd
is
also,
going
I'd
up
also
a
tell
lot.
Kylie at this meeting is to get the sticker shock out of the way. I always tell her, give you worst case scenario.
Right.
So that as she negotiates these down.
And
as
typically we get them down.
And as we clean up our numbers, we could then show you how we've reached savings from where worst case scenario looked like in September. That's why you're seeing it in the first quarter of the school
Right.
year. We're not gonna order
That's
until
fair
third quarter.
So that it won't get worse when I come back to you for second semester. Hopefully I can get it knocked down. And Discovery Education has actually been one of the best to work with in terms of they typically come in a little bit lower than what
As we continue to
started.
grow our one-on-one initiative and the teachers have taken off, I think it's also important though that we use our Chromebooks and the stuff that is out there to find other resources, because there are a lot of free resources that
Yes.
they can use to support the curriculum and for students to use. And that was the purpose, is to get a tool into students' hands so they weren't limited just to one book.
Yes.
So we need to continue to push that, which I'm sure you're already doing and Bridget's doing and the instructional coaches are doing.
But you also have budget less for paper, less for printers, right? Like, those things have gone down.
No.
Not,
Some, little bit.
not proportionately, but they have gone down.
We won't see the savings yet in the printers. This would be the year to look at it with it. Second year of implementation of the paper cut to monitor our printing.
Right.
If you looked at the paper cost over the last 8 years, it hasn't gone down.
No, but this is the first year that
Of
we are
100%.
fully
No,
one-to-one,
but my point is,
so-
people are agreeing the paper and printing costs have gone down. I think if you looked at the numbers, you'd find they haven't gone down. I'd be surprised if you could show me the paper costs and the printing costs have gone down over the last 8 years. And we've gone to a lot of electronics. We have everybody on Chromebooks, we've had that. I bet the printing and, maybe with the new copier it went down, but the paper cost didn't go down in our budget this year, did it?
We kept it at the same, but the actual was slightly under what was budgeted.
Well, we're supposed to budget what we think it's going to be, so we think it's staying the same. I think we should be careful when we make blanket statements like, it's, the paper is going down, the printing's going down, if that's not what our
That was
numbers
Ms.
show.
Towner that made this.
Okay. Some people were agreeing with her.
Scott said we gotta watch it the next 2 years.
This would be the year that we really would watch it to see where we're at.
Okay.
Year 2 of the new copiers with totally different makeup of how the teachers are getting their print jobs.
Okay.
And I'll
Kylie,
certainly
anything
dig in
else?
deeper for this. No, Dr. Ski has nothing. If the board doesn't have any questions, I have nothing else. I am happy to stop letting you listen to me talk.
Thank you. It was very informative.
Thank you very much.
Right. Thank you, Kylie.
Thank you.
Scott, you had the chief financial report. Why don't you review your cover memo so you could highlight the 4 key points, and then I think you had about 4 questions.
Yes. Okay, if we go to board book page 28 and just look at our monthly statement, if you look at the revenue side, we're collecting about $5 million in revenue. Big chunk of it is our real estate taxes that we're collecting, evidence-based funding from the state, and then fees that we collected for registration. On the expenditure side, as usual, salary and benefits is our largest. And then we had purchase service was pretty large because we paid the LADSI pre-bill in August. If we look at our financial statements, which are on board book page 27, that just highlights our fund balances after 2 months of this current year. On board book 28 is the revenue side. As far as the tracking percentage-wise, we're right on track with what I expected. We have kind of fluctuated a little bit with our tax collection and percentages. So trying to see where we're coming in here within the first 6 months is kind of key to see if those changes are going to be accurate. On board book page 29, on the expenditure side, if we look at the percentage for tracking, the only one that really stands out is the operations and maintenance one, and that's just a reminder that we did pay Airmark's full contract to get the discount on it, so the percentage does look higher on that. If we move on to the revenue expense report, there was one question submitted on board book page 42 in regards to certified salary under Title I. What happened here was an internal journal adjustment had to be made. The summer school Title I dollars were applied to the wrong account on it. If you were to look at board book page 44, you'll actually see the $13,331 was billed under summer school. So that was done to make sure that it matches what our Title I grant is to the Title I grant expenditures. Student activity reports are in your board book. Nothing out of the ordinary. There was one account in there that was about $100 in the negative. They were doing a fundraiser and got the money up front with it. It will be coming in with the proceeds on it, so that account will be back into the positives. And moving on to the last thing on my report is our electric and gas contracts will be expiring in June of 2019. I've been doing some research on where the rates are for electric and gas. They are at historical low rates out there compared to what we currently have. The cost saving potential is basically taking what our current fixed rates are based off of what potentially you could lock in currently right now. You take that difference times our annual usage, and that's how the savings is calculated on that. I have solicited 4 different energy vendors out there to give me quotes. Quotes do fluctuate on a day-to-day basis, and they also fluctuate on rates and terms that you have out there as far as how long you want to spread out the contract. So if it's 12 months, 24, or 36. What I'm looking to try to do here is get this locked in and try to take advantage of the potential savings. The savings is only for 1 year because then your term is locked in if you spread it out further. But the difference from what we're currently paying to what you can lock in, there is a savings out there in both the electric and gas. The contracts will be forthcoming, in October.
Scott, looking at this utility, is it worth doing it with the gas at only a $3,000 to $5,000 savings? Lock in something multi-year? I mean, obviously, if you could save $15,000 to $25,000, there's a little
On
more
the
incentive
electric.
on electricity.
I mean, overall.
How many years are you talking about locking into?
Either 24 or 36.
Months.
Months, yes, so 2 or 3. I know it is, I mean, it is savings. I can't predict what the weather's gonna be. And as it fluctuates from year to year, it is lower than what we currently are locked in with our fixed rate. With it, we'd have to use our current rate until in June, and then the new rate would kick in.
It's a
In
fixed,
July.
they'll lock in the rate for 24 to 36, a fixed rate?
Yes, all in fixed.
And then what about the association we belong to for?
They're part of the quote
Okay.
that we have. I'm working with them to try to get the best deal. The rates fluctuate from day to day, and they really are very minimal when you look at the different vendors. But there are some other options that are out there where you could potentially try to save some additional money with some programs that are offered.
We currently are in the Illinois Energy Consortium.
Yes.
And if we wanted to leave and purchase with an independent vendor, is there any type of exit tax or penalty or any kind of?
There is no penalty. We would just have to put in that we look to cancel. It's 90 days out.
Okay, so we need 90 days before June 30th.
Yes.
Okay, well, I think you should bring that proposal, considering we have a board member that works for a utility company that can help us review that.
Okay.
So I think it's worth looking at, for sure. Does the board have any other questions? Okay, Tim?
Oh, I gotta move on now, okay.
Visitors?
Since there are no visitors, we'll skip over the visitor statements. That brings us to.
Bob, do you want an opportunity to speak? Have any visitors? Okay. Just wanted to make
Discussion
sure.
information items. Does anybody have any, on my right, any items they want to add?
No.
On my left? Okay, so that brings us to police department radios.
No update at this time.
Okay, old business, life safety, capital items, capital improvements.
No update. We're working on in-house stuff with Joel and the private subcontractors. We have a meeting set for October to review the pool unit and the installation next summer, and when that will go out to bid. Once we have that meeting, we'll bring in the Facilities Advisory Council to give them an update on our plan, and then report that out to the board.
Okay. That brings us to new business, course fees, first read, page 63.
So on page 65, there is a chart that outlines the proposed increases in course fees, proposed decreases, and then the unchanged course fees. So you'll see that there are very few courses that we are requesting a proposed increase. Many of them are special education courses that are taught solely within the special education department, and the course fee that we're recommending matches the general education equivalent of that course. And so right now, supplies for these courses or novels for these courses are coming from whatever department corresponds. So typically the English department or the math department. Every now and then too, it does come from the special education department. So we just want to be consistent with those courses. AP European History would like to purchase a workbook to prepare students for the AP test. And then Earth Science and Reading, these are two courses that we've had on the books, but Earth Science traditionally was offered at the junior year, and Reading for only one period was offered at the sophomore year. With the College and Career Readiness Academy this year, we're offering them at the freshman year, so we just want to transfer those courses, the course fee to that freshman year course as well.
Does anybody have any questions on that? Do you want to add this as a consent agenda item for the next meeting?
We can.
Right.
Mary Ann,
We
make
can
note.
wait till next meeting to vote on it. It's a first read, right, Kristen? You don't need
It is a first read, yes,
Okay.
we have time.
Should we just add it to the consent agenda for
Yeah.
the next meeting, Mary Ann?
That's a good idea.
That brings us to the memorandum of understanding between our Riverside Brookfield High School and Youth Outreach Services.
The district was previously using Rosencrantz to help with counseling and interventions for substance abuse with students. And Kristen and her team at the building level have identified the youth outreach services. And so this is a memorandum of understanding so that they can work with our students at no cost to the district. And I believe there were a few questions that were submitted, Kristen.
Yes, so in the past, 2 years ago, Rosecrans had somebody that was here 1 day a week at RB, and the annual cost for that was over $17,000. And so because of that, and they were only here 1 day, last year we decided to not use their services, and we just used them for anytime we had a student who had a code of conduct violation, they could go to Rosecrans for free and receive an assessment to have a lesser consequence. And that was all that we used them for. So we currently don't have a contract or an MOU with Rosecrans at this time. And so youth outreach services were able to secure some additional grants, both at the federal and state level, which is why they can now offer the services to our area, because those grants have expanded their area that they're able to work with. And as you can see from their list of services, both in the scope of the work, in the action sheet, and also the MOU, it's much more detailed. So the amount of services that they can provide our students goes well beyond drug counseling. So we're very excited about that. There were 2 questions in particular. One was about background checks. And so now that we have the ability to do this at RB, we want to conduct the background check so that we get those results right away. And either youth outreach services or that staff member will be paying for the background check. There was also a question about whether or not we wanted the MOU for the school year or for the calendar year, since it was inconsistent. And so on the bottom of page 2, we plan to change that to read for the 18-19 school year, so the MOU is consistent without. And then lastly, there was a question submitted about section 3 of the MOU, which I believe is confidentiality. And so we reviewed it with the district's legal counsel, and they said that we are agreeing to no more than what we're already obligated to do by law in that section, and that by naming us, it also states that will not take or receive any information that youth outreach services may give us on students unless they have the parental consent on file as well.
Okay.
So our attorney felt comfortable with that section.
Have we ever talked to our outside counsel of whether we should be doing background checks on our contractors' employees?
We have a board policy that requires us to have contractors that are in regular contact with students must have a background check on file.
Right.
Whether or not it was completed and provided from the vendor, it does not clarify in our board policy with the in-house ability now of taking fingerprints and having direct counseling with students. We thought it'd be another level of protection for the district to have it in our file.
I think you should talk to our outside counsel whether we should be doing background checks on our contractors' employees.
Okay.
Now, what does it mean dependent? The only question you didn't answer, Kristen, was the teen pregnancy dependent on region? Are we in a region where they would provide that service, or?
We are.
Okay.
I don't think we're
Seems like it's odd to
Yes.
be by region. but-
And that wasn't their language, and I don't think we plan to use that in the first year, but we'll see.
Thank you. Is there urgency on this one, or can we wait till the
This
next
one-
board meeting?
This one you were looking for approval, correct?
I
It says
would, just
first
because
read.
we have to, we still need to secure a staff member from Youth Outreach Services to come here, and so that's gonna take some time too. And so I'd like to get it up and running as quickly as possible, so we're ready to go for the second quarter.
Marion, this is labeled as a special committee of the meeting of the whole, correct? So that if we needed to take a vote, this board meeting is labeled as a special committee?
Yes.
We can
Special
take a
meeting?
vote.
So we could take a vote?
So does anybody have any questions or concerns if we take a vote on this today?
Yeah.
So just to clarify, they have not started yet till this
Right, they
is
can't start
taken
until we
care of?
approve the MOU.
Okay. And this is no cost to us?
Correct.
There's two, go on, John.
Where are they getting their grant money?
You can go on their website and see, they have a whole list of different sources, but they have some federal grants, they have some state grants, and they have some local grants as well.
I guess the only thing you didn't say, we know it's free. Do we know if they provide quality services? Do you know anything about them besides the fact this is
So
free?
they started working with Argo last year, and Argo has been very satisfied
Okay.
and is looking to expand.
Okay.
And then they did some very preliminary work with LT last year, and they're hoping to expand that as well.
Okay.
They're also working with SE Gross, and they're planning on providing services for that school as well.
Okay.
Is there any, I mean, what do they get out of this? Why are they expanding? I mean.
Why are the other
mission
schools
or-
expanding?
Yeah, it's a non-profit group, and they're looking to, their grants cover more regions now. So some of their grants have been specific as to what region of students that they can work with, and this one has expanded to our area.
Is there any confidentiality issues, or do they use the student data, or are they doing research or anything like that?
No.
Okay.
Are you okay with it then, John? I'm willing to read it in and vote on it, except I want to add the language that we had. The outside counsel didn't understand my question. They didn't answer the question that I asked, and I'll clarify for Kevin so he can ask them, and whether we should be doing the background checks. So subject to you clarifying those two, and if necessary, amending it. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's what I suggested to Chris and the board in the past is on things with some time sensitive would say, subject to final changes by outside legal counsel and the superintendent.
So if the people don't mind, I'll read the resolution so I can add that language in, okay? Resolved that the Board of Education, Township High School District 2A, Cook County, Illinois, hereby approves the Youth Outreach Service Memorandum of Understanding, subject to the superintendent working with outside counsel to address background checks for the contractor employees and the confidentiality language as presented in the September 25th, 2018 board agenda packet.
Second.
So, seconded by Ms. Towner. So, would you take the vote?
Could we?
Go on, hold on. You want to discuss it? I'm sorry,
Just a little more discussion here.
Okay.
Sorry.
That's okay.
How are we going to monitor if this is working? And is this only like annually we have to renew it, or perpetual, or what is it?
We have set up so that we can annually renew it, but how we've monitored it in the past is by the number of students that they have seen, and then also for the students that we do have parental consent to share data both ways on, we would be able to monitor whether or not we've seen growth in those students.
So we have the right to terminate for cause. Our dimension with the cause is when you're getting a free service with 30 days notice, and it can be renewed on a mutual written consent by the parties. So almost we'd have to do an amendment at the end of the term.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Ms. Ruska?
Yes.
Dr. King?
Yes.
Ms. Sierra?
Yes.
Ms. Tamara?
Yes.
Mr. Walsh?
Yes. The matters for closed session are personnel, student discipline, individual student matters, purchase or lease of real property, probable, imminent, or pending litigation, collective negotiations, and school safety. There's no visitors still, so we'll skip over that. There were no discussion items requested. Does anybody want to add any items to be considered at future meetings at this point? Nobody? Okay. Does somebody want to read the resolution for the closed session?
Resolved that the Board of Education, Township High School District 208, Cook County, Illinois, enters closed session for the purpose of considering appointment, employment, compensation, discipline, performance, or dismissal of specific employees of the public body or legal counsel for the public body, student discipline, sale or lease of real property, probable, imminent, or pending litigation, collective negotiations, and school safety.
Second.
John, you seconded?
Yes, we did.
Would you take the vote?
Yes.
Ms. Sierra?
Yes.
Ms. Towner?
Yes.
Mr. Walsh?
Yes.
Ms. Ruska?
Yes.
Okay, it's About 12 too. We start around 5 downstairs. Does that work for everybody?